But we'll start with our first little number this week is actually the same as the big number, and that is 0, which is how many minutes the Cleveland Cavaliers have played without at least one of Donovan Mitchell or James Harden on the floor since the trade deadline. According to PBP stats, 96 total minutes across 2 games. 41 of them have had both Mitchell and Harden on the floor. Mitchell's run the show solo for 28. Harden has run it for 27, and 0 minutes of neither of them on the floor. That's the stagger, right? That's the aggressive stagger we talked about when we got into the Harden trade last week. Cavs have been at their best so far in the Mitchell-only minutes, to be expected. Harden is still getting his feet wet and getting acclimated to his new teammates. But they've won both games. They're scoring 125 points per 100 possessions with both those guys on the floor, which is, lights out, right up there, top offense in the league. They've won both those games, and Harden came through in a pretty big way in the fourth quarter against the Nuggets, which was a marquee game on Monday night. Finished with 22 points, 10 boards, 7 assists, 4 of those helpers in the fourth quarter, and he had a game-tying step-back 3 in the final minute to tie it up at 117, set it up for Donovan Mitchell to cook in the final possession, hit the game-winning free throws, and then a big, impressive win over a pretty darn good Nuggets team, even though they're dealing with their injuries. So when we talked about we talked about the Cavaliers, the idea was maximize your chances at winning this year, right? That was the argument of going from Darius Garland up to Harden, an older player, but a better right now player. Cavs now enter Wednesday's action, a game at a third place in the East. They get the Wizards, as we talked about, probably not giving it the old college try. And their final game before the All-Star break, and their first game back from the break next Thursday is against the Nets, Ibid. Dunks and threes and Unpredictable now give Cleveland better than a 70% chance of landing a top 3 seed in the East. So biggest move for right now of the deadline was the Harden for Garland move, and early returns look like the Cavs are getting what they paid for.
Yeah. Here's a hot take. I think the issue for the Cavs last year in the postseason wasn't about their staggering of Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. It was that when they played together, they were getting blown out. It was the fit of them playing together was the problem. And so it is good to see that they're staggering those minutes and they're doing well in those minutes. The staggering, Donovan Mitchell alone, when he was playing without Darius Garland last year, the Cavs were awesome in the postseason. And in the short time that we saw that. And then the Darius Garland-led Cavs with Donovan Mitchell on the bench were actually pretty good too. It's just when they were together, they were minus 10 every 100 possessions, according to PBPstats.com. And so they said, look, we need to do better than that. And James Harden, I think, is an upgrade from Darius Garland. Maybe not for the next 10 years, but an upgrade right now. And he's healthier and more available. So as I wrote for TomTheFiner.com this week, the trade deadline acquisition of James Harden, I think, puts them in a pretty interesting position of getting to that number 1 seed potentially. Now that you see the Detroit Pistons we'll talk about this later, dealing with the suspensions, the Cavs have the most tank-heavy schedule on the remaining slate of games that they have. They have this Wizards game, and then they have the Brooklyn Nets game coming out of the break. They've got 13 games ahead of them against a bunch of those tanking teams, and that's tied for the most in the league. So the Boston Celtics only have 8 such games. The Detroit Pistons had 9 such games. So they are going to be able to close the gap if they take advantage of this schedule cushion that they have here. So I wouldn't be surprised if they get 2. I would be surprised if they got the number 1 seed. But now with these suspensions, the Cavs got to be pretty excited about the slate ahead of them and how things seem to be breaking their way.
Another trade deadline takeaway here for our second little number is 4. That's how many teams are now projected to have salary cap space this summer, according to Bobby Marks of ESPN. That's down from nearly a third of the league before the deadline. The 4 teams projected to have salary cap space in the summer of 2026 are the Brooklyn Nets, the Chicago Bulls, Los Angeles Lakers, and Memphis Grizzlies. The Lakers are probably expected to use a hefty chunk of that to bring back Austin Reeves, but TBD on that. The playoffs will wind up telling us a lot about which direction the Lakers want to go as they build around Luka Doncic. The other teams, though, we kind of fit into what we've been talking about. The Nets, the Grizzlies, the Bulls, all of them, where they are in the standings, read low. And what they did at the trade deadline, which was mostly about looking toward the future, taking on contracts or taking on draft picks to try to figure out what they can build moving forward. These teams don't seem particularly likely to splash a lot of cash in free agency this summer. And I think that makes sense because when you look at the list of likely free agents this summer, it's extremely heavy on guys on the wrong side of 30. You're talking about LeBron, Zach LaVine, James Harden, CJ McCollum, Chris Middleton, Kristaps Porzingis, Andrew Wiggins, Tobias Harris, Fred VanVleet, if he actually, if he moves out of there, he's got the player option. Draymond Green, Terry Rozier, which Terry Rozier, TBD. Contavious Caldwell-Pope, Nick Vucevic. There are some younger guys here. Trae Young. I think we're all expecting to see a.
Yeah, point taken. Yeah, this isn't a great free agency year, and part of that is because of the pre-agency that we're seeing in the league, and also if you're a good young player, you're going to be locked up on a contract, and teams are going to want to do that, and so it makes sense. The Trae Young acquisition, I called it from the beginning being like, that is a salary floor acquisition, is that they're just trying to add salary
to spend the
in
money,
order
right?
they have nothing on the books. They've got no contracts on the books beyond this season, and they get Trae Young and Anthony Davis here. I'm still out on that deal. I don't love that for the Wizards. I just feel like they're getting right back on that hamster wheel of mediocrity that we saw for so long for the Wizards. And like you said, like, you're eating into your summer cap space for what? For the chance to have the headache of Anthony Davis. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? And Trae Young, his defense is such that you need amazing defensive guys in order for him to be a break-even type player. He's a great passer, iffy shooter, a guy that can, lead your offense. But I have real questions about Trae Young and Anthony. I wouldn't be actually. You know what? I'll just say it. I wouldn't be surprised if they played 0 games together. Going forward. I mean, just the injuries and Anthony Davis's desire to win games. I don't suspect that you'll see Anthony Davis and Trae Young much next year. I wouldn't be surprised if they were flipped to a contender at the deadline. This is just straight arbitrage by Will Dawkins and the front office there in Washington, is just saying like, hey, we're buying low on these guys and then we'll flip them to contenders next year, but we're still very much in a rebuild state. We'll see if that strategy works. I don't really think that the strategy of adding these two guys to maybe make the playoffs next year is equally as exciting. But yeah, there's not going to be much free agency action this summer. But look, there'll be trades. The draft will be very interesting. So free agency is not dead. That transaction window will be exciting for trades, I think. But you're right. There's just not a lot of free agency movement. And I think it might be just LeBron going back to Cleveland will be the most exciting thing. And then not much after that.
Which is, I think that's what motivated a lot of the movement that we did see, is like teams doing their work early because they didn't think there was really going to be something they were excited to spend their money on this summer, or that they weren't going to have an opportunity to get those guys. Like if they were under contract, that's somebody that you can't just go out on the market and pick up. So, and that extends to other moves too, like even the Wolves getting Ayo Dosunmu and his bird rights, right? Like the Wolves maybe wouldn't have been able to win an open bidding for him in the free agency pool, but they could get the opportunity to sort of figure it out now and help themselves in this postseason push. So I think that motivated at least some of what happened. Speaking of motivations and what all happened, our third and final little number is 7. That's how many trades the Chicago Bulls made between February 1st and the final buzzer at 3 p.m. Eastern on February 5th. That's notable because 7's a lot of trades in like 4 days. But also in the previous 4 trade deadlines, Arturas Karnisovas had made 1 trade. That was last year, the trade that sent Zach LaVine to Sacramento. So he went from 1 over 4 years to 7 in 4 days. And I think let's sort of lay out what all happened. The wheeling and dealing results in Nick Vucevic, Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, Kevin Huerter, Dalen Terry, and Julian Phillips all landing in new places. Anthony Simons, Jaden Ivey, Colin Sexton, Rob Dillingham, Gershon Yabusele, Nick Richards, Leonard Miller, and 9 second-round picks coming to the Bulls. I believe I have that all right. If I didn't get it right, that's a lot to try to parse through, so bear with me. What is the Bulls now, Tom? What does all of this do? It was a lot of activity. I went in the winners and losers column. I just basically put them in like winners because you went to go buy a Costco. You just did a lot. It was a lot of activity. I'm not sure about the alacrity of it all, though. Where do you see the Bulls now after all of that?
Without hope. That's it. Like, I feel like if you're a Bulls fan, do you feel more hopeful about your future with all these deals in the second round picks than if you are the Utah Jazz fans? if I'm a Jazz fan or a Nets fan or a Wizards fan, they still have their pick this year. I feel like the tanking and bottoming out is going to be worth it because I have a shot at getting an AJ DeBonta, Darren Peterson, Caleb Wilson, Cam Boozer type. With the Bulls, I feel like it's 4 years too late. I feel like it should have been done years ago, and they're now, I guess, trying to race to the bottom. And I feel like this is too little, too late for me. I like Kobe White. I like Ayo Dosunmu. I like a lot of the guards that they sent out in these deals, and I'm not super in love with the guys that they got back. I think the Charlotte Hornets got better. Minnesota Timberwolves got better. And for that matter, the Minnesota Timberwolves, I feel like we're a sneaky, really good winner at the deadline because I love the Ayo Dosunmu move for the Minnesota Timberwolves, getting him and his bird rights, like you mentioned, from Chicago. And I also like what Charlotte got in Kobe White. And yeah, he might be a little banged up, and they surrendered another second round pick. They had to change the second round pick package in that deal. But I don't understand the plan in Chicago, Dan. So your guess is as good as mine what Konashevis is doing. But kind of cycling through guards and Josh Giddey, are you more excited if you're a Chicago Bulls fan now than you were before? Maybe because you got this package of second round picks that maybe you can parlay into a first at some point. But I just, that is the worry if you don't tank, is that you're the Chicago Bulls. Like, that is maybe the most uninspired organization of the last 5-10 years. It just feels like they're perpetually in this, the hamster wheel of mediocrity is just constantly cycling through guys that are going to get you 45 wins, maybe. And we're just going to be in the play-in tournament every year.
Yeah, I think to the extent that there's a glass half full sunny side of this argument or case, I think it's that you make the move to get Josh Giddey, you sign Josh Giddey. The identity of the team is supposed to be we play super fast and we try to be a transition team with, big playmakers, right? And who do you have to surround Josh Giddey with? It's guys who can run and guys who can shoot, and then hopefully guys who can defend. Matas Buzelis, I think, fits that, right? Noah Esenge, they haven't gotten to see very much because of his injury this season of the rookie. They hope that he will fit that as an athletic kind of big. Jaden Ivey, things, certainly profiled as a downhill, fast-paced player coming out of Purdue. Things didn't work out with his injuries in Detroit. Didn't really get the opportunity to take off the way that he would have hoped for. Rob Dillingham, this is like another intriguing sort of second draft guy, fast, downhill, get to the rim. Out of Kentucky, and it was in a position where he kind of really didn't get to play where he could make a mistake for a team that was like consistently trying to make the conference finals. So the hope here is you're finding a handful of guys who are like young, fast, can get to the rim to play alongside Giddey. You still have to figure out what wings or bigs can do that. They kind of don't have an answer to that beyond Jalen Smith. And I think that, TBD, we'll see about that. Yeah. And now you've got, I think it's 14 total second round picks under your control in the years to come, plus your own firsts as you move out of the Vucevic era.
Raise the banner, 14 second rounders. Let's go.
And maybe it means nothing. Maybe those 14 second rounders don't really grease the skids on any deals, but it at least gives you some more optionality as you try to figure out how do you make deals to put a team, a coherent thought of a kind of team around Giddey. You are going to need guys who can run. You're going to need guys who can shoot, and you're going to need guys who can defend. I don't know that they've got many of those, but it's at least a look-see on a few of them that are young and maybe some more, raw materials to go find some more. I think that's a pretty thin case, which is why I made it as half-heartedly as I did. But Bulls fans, you can never say I didn't make an effort.